example of the family blaming the other one for being here, which we see quite often. You're the reason why I'm here. You're the reason why I'm not with my family. You're the reason why my mom is sick back home and I can't take care of her. You know, it's kind of unproductive interactions with family members. Another thing that would fall into that is how mom and dad are interacting with their children, or partners are interacting with their children. So we want to look at those interactions. Limited need for family advocacy intervention. So part of military services is an advocacy program. And so our servicemen and women can come and talk to different individuals, you know, related to their different needs. It may be related to transitioning with their furniture. It could be related to needing household good items. It could be related to needing counseling services. And in general, it's healthy for service members to reach out, particularly when there's a new transition and things may be not quite in sync at home and those kinds of things. But when we see consistent, repetitive reaching out and goals are not being met and things of that nature, that's kind of when we have defined that as being just an unsuccessful transition. But if we see folks who come in and we're able to kind of help them with a solution-focused approach, here are some skills for you to take and use, and they're able to take those and run with it, that's a limited need for family advocacy intervention, for counseling services and those kinds of things. No need for security intervention. So sometimes what we see is folks who maybe are arguing in their home, or having unproductive conversations, as we discussed earlier, and so a neighbor may call security with the housing department. And so then security has to come, and then a report is filed, and then that includes other individuals. And so if a family has any kind of intervention with security, then we would consider that an unsuccessful overseas transition. And no need for command intervention. So sometimes what we have seen is individuals, families who will come in and maybe they're working with the same command, and one individual may be reporting to another command member how upset or hurt they are, maybe husband or wife is being abusive verbally, those kinds of things. And so then the command intervenes and might report this family as needing counseling services. So we would define that also as an unsuccessful transition. So basically, individuals who either do not come for intervention or who come for intervention and are able to take those skills and kind of run with them, we consider that a successful transition for that family. And then we're defining resilience as military families' ability to adjust successfully to an overseas relocation as a result of military orders. And I've already gotten into what we consider to be successful transitioning versus unsuccessful transitioning. So here are the basic elements that we've discovered to be part of a successful transition for a family. We've got, it could be anyone who's enlisted. Is it okay, Alana, for me to go ahead and answer questions as we're talking, or would you prefer to wait till the end?
Your preference.
Okay. It could be anyone who's enlisted. By enlisted, I mean anyone who is part of the military. We even work with individuals who are part of security. As long as you are associated with a branch of the military, that's what we mean by enlisted. So yes, it could be an officer on up. So some of the factors that we are looking at that we've discovered to be, you know, primary in our folks and our families who are successfully transitioning include spirituality, a support network, resourcefulness before and after transition, flexibility, preparedness before the transition, and the family relationship dynamics. Some of these overlap a little bit, and then there's also some research to support and indicate that some of these factors we found have kind of already been proven to be resilience factors, but there are a couple that are not. And we're going to highlight each of these and talk a little bit about that here in just a few minutes. Okay, when we look at spirituality, we're going with dictionary.com. It's an overall concern with eternal human condition elements of life. And the focus here is on eternal, not physical and material elements of life. We noted that 75% of the families that we worked with attended some kind of religious services. Now, I use the term religious loosely. It's kind of another one of those items or those terms that it's hard to operationalize, right? We use that as someone who, or a family who meditates individually and as a family. They may pray individually and as a family, use devotionals or meaningful readings and study individually or as a family. And it's important here to say that spirituality with this group of folks was really a focus on other forces. So it wasn't necessarily, for example, Buddha or God. It could be elements of nature. It's more of a spiritual experience for the individual, which I found interesting because I did not see any of the other literature in that I viewed indicate that spirituality was a resilience factor. And we noted this in 75% of the population we worked with, those who successfully transitioned. I want to emphasize here, spirituality means something different for each family that we saw. And it could be a part of who their culture. It could be a part of the way they were raised in their family environment. There were so many elements that we looked at for spirituality. And so I just listed a few here, a few of the key items that we noted over and over again. But again, there was just a wealth of spirituality concepts and ideas and themes that we saw when we worked with our families. Okay, support networks. 85% of the folks who successfully transitioned had a strong support network. And they didn't necessarily have to come with the strong support network. So I'm going to start down here with this bottom point. Many of the families that had a strong support network started developing that network on their transition overseas. And I found that very interesting. So families would be on the airplane together. They would stop at different locations to fuel up or whatever it may be, and develop a friendship. When they first get to an overseas location, there's a transition period where you're in a hotel or you're in some kind of a location where you're staying together generally. And so those families really bonded. They helped watch each other's children. So maybe mom and dad could go out and get a bite to eat, and really formed a social support network, even without knowing each other prior to coming into the overseas transition. So I found that interesting. And we've also found that our military families tend to, the ones who are successful, they tend to reach out for that social networking, that social support early on. And it's almost like there's an attitude or presence of we are in this and we need to do this versus the I, which generally correlated with an unsuccessful transition. Religious factors, again, came into play with the support network. And so we would have many folks who would play a component in some type of religious activity on the base. And that could be anything from attending a Sunday service, their specific religion, and generally there are several different services. Or it could be a group that maybe they have formulated, for example, on Facebook. Many of our families have Facebook homes, and different religious groups will, connect there. And so you could even, as a family, find support and connect with your particular religious values and a group who also shares those values before you even transition overseas. So it's a very positive experience in terms of already having that religious kind of network there for you. Familial networks, and this was within the unit themselves, and also with maybe parents or siblings, others who are back home. So if if a family was traveling, for example, to Italy, and the wife had a strong familial support system with mom and was able to connect back and forth with her and kind of have someone to share, was a common theme that we would find. And also for our husbands or for males, it didn't have to necessarily be a biological mom or dad, but someone that they consider to be family, was really helpful for this group of folks who successfully transitioned. And then, I kind of touched on military community with the friendship and networks, but in general, the military community, I want us to think a little larger, okay, with that. With the friendship networks, that's more of a close relationship, and like I said, that usually developed out of them traveling. But the military community as a whole is more, okay, reaching out to others after I'm here, or reach out to command representatives. I'm looking for community through Facebook, through different lists and other things that are available to me, maybe attending social events. And there's all kinds of different events going on for military families who are transitioning overseas. And so just being able to participate in those areas and feel like you're a part of the military community. One other area here that I wanted to mention is family NDOC. So families who attended the NDOC, basically it's a time where you're learning about the culture of the place where you've just moved to, and generally you'll take small trips out in town and things of that nature. And so there's a wealth of information that you're provided, and also opportunity to develop friendships and to network in that opportunity. So families who were able to kind of wrap their arms around these different areas tended to have a more successful transition overseas. Okay, 70% of the observed families were able to be resourceful. Okay, so you would, like, for example, locate and utilize the available programs and assistance provided by the government. I'm surprised at how many families are unaware of what's available to them. And there are individuals in place to identify what's available to you. And so a lot of times it just takes reaching out. And there's also a lot of communication that goes out, like on the radio, or through the different newspapers, online tools, through the military's Facebook at the location at where families are. And so it's odd to see how many folks just do not know what's available to them. And some of the examples we have here are like dishes, temporary furniture, claims related to broken household goods. I had a young man, his family was going through an unsuccessful transition, and he had brought his new motorcycle. They just bought a new motorcycle. This was over to Italy. The handlebars got broken off completely. Gave him the paperwork and everything for the government to reimburse him, and he didn't go through the steps. At first he was upset over not being able to, that it happened, and then, okay, we can get it fixed, get our money back. He didn't go through the steps to go to his command and pursue that. And so there was a disconnect on, hey, can I get reimbursement? And then even after that, there was just kind of an inability to really take a hold of the resources that are available. And that's really sad for me. I think there's a lot of components that go into that. I'm getting a little bit off topic here, but I think sometimes our families are overwhelmed with just trying to acclimate to the new environment and the new role. A lot of times transitions overseas means more work because there's fewer people. And so you're doing the work of maybe 5 individuals back in the States. It does get a little bit tricky like that. And so, that kind of thing. Paperwork for reimbursement purposes. There are so many families who come overseas, and there is some money that's upfront that you're required, to basically have, or you can get like an advance on your pay, but you have to just know that eventually down the road, the government's going to pull some of your paycheck out to pay back that money that you had an advance on. And so I see so many folks who, first of all, didn't know they could have an advance, and so they're financially frustrated. And then they didn't realize that they were going to have that money pulled from their bank account in order to pay it back eventually. So just quite not resourceful in understanding what's happening. And I think that's all I want to say about that. Let's look in here. All right. Oh, prior preparation efforts. And this was also noted in the other research that we talked about earlier, I think particularly with the focused program, and then the other two elements that we had discussed in the second PowerPoint, the second slide. We noted that 70% of our successful transitions had prior preparation efforts. Okay, so those folks had kind of done their homework, all right? Or maybe they had a sponsor from the overseas location who was more resourceful. I'm not sure, but I know that when my husband and I have gone through overseas relocations, even with a helpful sponsor, he was the one who really had to nail down, okay, this is the paperwork we need. This is what we can expect. Here's what's going to happen when we land in Spain, and then when we move on to Italy, or when we go to this place. Here's what we can get reimbursed. Kind of understanding the reimbursement process, understanding what's going to happen with the paperwork, and there's tons of paperwork, so it is a little bit overwhelming too. And then you have the housing process. What does that look like? Our folks who are successfully transitioning generally have already made an appointment with the housing department. They're ready to kind of jump in and see homes when they get here, versus our unsuccessful transitions are kind of wondering, where is the housing department? Just being prepared, understanding what does the temporary living quarters process look like. I've had several folks who didn't know how long they could be in temporary living quarters. And so they're coming up near the end of their time, and they don't really have a home to move into yet. They don't understand the currency. So even though I may have found a home that I like, the U.S. money that you're getting has to be converted to the currency of the place that you live. And so if you're doing your homework up front, you kind of know those things, where your limits are financially, and that preparation work has been completed. The other thing that I find with my successful transition is that these folks understand the cultural expectations and other region-specific entities that they can anticipate. So these families have generally done the research. They know, for example, when you're in Italy and you have a little blonde-headed child, the old women are going to come up to that little child and they're going to pat him on the head because they think it's good luck. And it's just common. And so even though, you may be thinking, please get away from my kid, it's part of the culture. Another thing that I see often is in overseas locations, Americans can get stared at, particularly if it's an area where there's not a lot of Americans. And so know that you might be facing that. In general, it's not a matter of we don't like you or we don't want you here. It's a matter of, oh, you're different. And so I want to just check you out and see your mannerisms and all those kinds of things. Also understanding the culture of driving, there's all kinds of different areas, but as much literature as you can read and kind of understand what to expect. Talk to your friends, get on Facebook, try to connect with folks who are already there, who may be even transitioning out. Oh, flexibility. Okay. This is a huge number. Okay. 90% of our families who were successfully transitioning overseas were able to maintain flexibility. And this is such an important area here that I put a definition of what we kind of see flexibility as. Fluidly engage with unexpected changes that occur, and fluidly implies moving from one concern to another without significant interruption. Oh my goodness. Overseas transitioning is riddled with unexpected changes. I mean, it is just crazy. And so our families who are able to say, okay, this is what I have control over, this is what I don't have control over, and take the areas that you know we don't have control over and just remain flexible with that. And it may mean, for example, calling the housing department every day for 2 weeks. It may mean checking up on paperwork that you've submitted for reimbursement, you know, for the 6th time. It takes persistence, but those individuals are, or it may be something like, you know, my car is not going to be here for another 3 weeks. Our household goods are not going to be here for another 3 weeks. So we're in temporary housing for this much longer, or we're having to borrow furniture. So those kinds of things, just remaining flexible and knowing that there are things that are going to come up. You cannot predict everything. Oh, and I kind of mentioned those different areas and flexibility there. The core family relationships, all right? 65% of families with a successful overseas transition, the mother, father, and children maintain open communication. And I think this number could be a bit higher because we really could measure this just with our families who had children. It seemed like those were the items we could pick out from that group versus maybe partners or others who didn't have children. So that number is still pretty high, 65%. But a lot of times what we saw with successful transition is parents communicating to their children, Mommy misses home too. Daddy misses my friends back home. Or we miss our old house too. And identifying with their children in relationship to the loss that they feel, along with the excitement. You know, there's excitement as well, but generally we found somewhere around the end of the month, starting that end of 1 month, beginning of 2 months, that's when we're like, oh, brother, there's going to be some challenges here. And that's when we start to think, okay, where are we? What is this going to look like for the next, I don't know, 3 years, 5 years, depending on how long you've been deployed for. Another quality that we saw, resilience factor that we saw with our families and successful transition, were families who played together. They engaged in social activities together. They maintained togetherness. And so I think the theme I want to get across here is that they really tried to make sure the children felt a part of the family unit. In our unsuccessful transitions, and sometimes this can't be helped, so I'm not blaming families, but we would see individuals who the first, after they got there, maybe the second or third day, their children were signed up with the daycare service on base. And so children were then taken there. They weren't part of the NDOC training. They were not part of really what mom and dad were doing to transition. The communication basically to those children would go something like, look, this is what we're doing. This is how it is. Get over it. And so we tended to see more disruption in families who handled that way versus those who included their children, talked about their emotions, and also mom and dad sharing about their emotions. Just keeping an eye on my time here. So here are some treatment options. Basically, we have found a solution-focused approach to be most effective. And I think the reason why is because our military families come with us. They don't have a lot of time. I think of like psychoanalysis, maybe Gestalt, those types of techniques and areas, theories, theoretical approaches tend to take more time and exploration. Our military families, when they come in to see us, they really need to be able to hit the ground running and provide them with tools that they can take with us. So we basically explore the resilience areas: spirituality, support network, resourcefulness, prior preparation, flexibility, core family relationships. So we explore those areas with them. And for example, some of our families, spirituality is just not something that they're interested in. All right. And so we don't look at that factor any further with that individual. Their support network. Maybe they have a strong support network here, but mom and dad, it's a mess back home. The family relationship is just terrible. we do not engage with the family relationship. We talk about what's going on here and now and how they can use that support network and the tools that they have developed in order to move forward successfully. And then we go through that for these different areas here so that we're able to identify maybe concerns that are coming up. So like, for example, my unsuccessful family transitions, they may have problems with that core family and how they're talking to each other, those poor communication habits we talked about. And then we give them, you know, solution-focused approaches for handling that. So like, for example, using I statements might be something. If it's something related to resourcefulness, we will give them tools. You can go to this webpage and it'll give you information about X, Y, and Z. You can talk to this person about housing. You can, we try to provide them what they need from more of a solution-focused approach. Okay, future research. I think we really have got to define what we want resilience to be for military families. And, my husband and I have kind of got an idea of what that looks like for us. You see, we used just a really general definition because in the literature, there are so many focused definitions that I think it takes away from all that resilience encompasses. So just really nailing down that definition and how do we do that? Well, obviously by looking at previous research, gleaning from what we're learning when we're working with our military families now, and how do we want to just kind of put all of that together to come up with something I think that we can actually wrap our hands around that's not so big that we get tied up in technical terms, but at the same time it's measurable. I think that's a big thing. Is it being measurable? Because it's difficult, again, to just have an assessment that just quickly goes down through there and says, okay, you're meeting resilience factors, these are the ones you don't have, and let's talk about that and how do we, help with that process. Defining family, what does that look like? Families are ever changing. And so just making sure we have a clear identity of what we're looking at with our families. I'd like to nail down, and I think we need to nail down an operational definition for each of our resilience factors. And, your research may come up with other resilience factors. But ideally, I would like to see, particularly with us, the resilience factors that we have come up with, I'd like to see those with a concrete operational definition, which we could use to assess our military families and where they are, even just a quick assessment. I think in the NDOC period would be great for this group. Spirituality, flexibility, and resourcefulness were three areas that I think were a little difficult for us to kind of get our brains around, those three especially. And then I think it would be great out of this material if we could come up with some kind of a manual or a guide that is related to not only resilience factors, but two of the key areas, resourcefulness and prior preparation. There's some things out there, but I can tell you from our personal experience, and my husband, a man with a doctorate degree who researches everything, he is on top of it. There's really nothing out there that identifies, okay, here's the resourcefulness areas that you need to be aware of. It's all here, it's neat and tidy, and this is what you need to look at in more of a general form. And then also that prior preparation. What do you need to do before you come? And there are some lightweight materials out there. I don't want to say that there's not, but I'm thinking of our experience, and there were so many factors, very important factors, that we were in the dark about. And if my husband had not really researched it and looked in the fine print on the document that had 20 pages that we just got finished signing, he wouldn't have known about those areas. Oh, and then we're at the references. So that leaves us just a few minutes for questions. I think, Alana, does that leave us with just a few minutes for questions?
Yeah, we have about 20 minutes.
Oh, I thought we had to end at 10 till.
Or 10 minutes if you want to. That works. But if anybody has any questions, we can post them in the comments, or if anybody wants to unmute, there's not too many people, so we can kind of go from there.
I'm not seeing or hearing any questions. Are you, Alana? Any thoughts about the resilience factors or anything at all? I felt like I kind of rushed there at the end because I thought we needed to be out of here by 10 till. But anything at all you guys wanted to talk about? Maybe you have an experience with overseas transitioning, or you work with military families. Anything you'd like to share related on your experience? Well, does that mean we have a few minutes before our next meeting, Alana, or what should we do?
That's your preference. I do have to share a slide with everybody real quick, and it's for...
Oh, I think we're getting some questions. Hold on just a second. Let me see if I can pull those back up here.
I can go ahead and read one to you. It's from Karen. It's, have you found that these resilience factors are relevant to military families where one partner deploys and the other remains home?
We have not looked at that. So that's a great idea there, Karen. I think that's another area of research to look and see what's happening with our folks where, you know, husband or wife or partner is leaving the home. So no, we have basically looked at families who are transitioning together. Oh, so Jamie, I knew I read that somewhere, Jamie. I read in an email somewhere that we should end early to give folks time to get to the next session. So, okay, good. Maybe I'm not going totally crazy, but it could happen. It could happen. Nothing surprises me, right? Right now, nothing surprises me with all that's going on.
I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen real quick. We're supposed to share that we have a sponsor. Basically, we're sponsored by Tavera. It's pretty much what's on there. And then if you're a Chicago school student, the course evaluations are by April 16th. That's about it.
I had a question for the continuing education credits. Is that automatic by signing up into a different presentation, or how does that work?
So essentially for the credits, we take an attendance after 15 minutes into the presentation, and we submit the presentations, or the attendance rather.
Thank you, Alana.
I don't remember how to stop sharing my screen though, so. There it is. And there's another question here. It says, has there been any insight about mental health diagnosis and the impact on resilience in these families transitioning from location to location?
Our team specifically focuses with non-diagnosable areas. So for example, we're not looking at depression, PTSD, things of that nature. We're really looking at more adjustment related areas. So I would say no, we have not. We were specifically focusing on individuals who are just coming in with more adjustment related type areas and concerns. I think that's a great way to look at that though. Maybe we should explore that a little bit more.
Another question here.
Yeah.
Are you a military and family life counselor then?
My husband is the FAR for the FAP team. And so it's basically a counseling program with licensed professionals, and our servicemen and women can go there and receive counseling, and I'm a part of that process as well, but he kind of oversees everything, so that they're not moving are not going to the hospital, where there's a stigma there, and we're actually working on that as well, because our military members do not want a diagnosis related to, you know, concerns they might have for potential moving up the chain and, you know, all those kinds of things. And so basically when they come to us, it's more, you know, life skills, adjustment. You may have, you know, feeling down, things of those areas, but we do not clinically diagnose. We could clinically diagnose, but the FAT program is not for that purpose. If we see that someone, for example, is suicidal or homicidal, they would be referred then to the hospital. And then that's when they might receive a diagnosis or even be transferred. Particularly when you look at overseas, you know, services. Some locations, I'm thinking about Europe in particular, you know, like I think of Spain, the Rota, I think of Italy, Sigonella, and I think of our base up in Milan. Those areas do not have as many resources for military families. So what we might have, for example, if we have someone who's suicidal, they may be flown to Germany, where we have more resources in terms of care for that individual. Okay, if you're going for the LPC, here's what we have found. In general, the LCSW is kind of seen, it's carried a little more weight for longevity. So you might see in your application an LCSW or LPC with an LMFT. So I would strongly encourage you, as you're doing your LPC, just go right on ahead and get your LMFT. It's LMFT in the state of Virginia. It might be something else. It's basically a licensed marriage and family therapist, or a doctorate degree. So you're going to see that in some of the language. I will say though that tide is changing, because we're having a lot of advocacy in our field, and I think we're certainly being recognized. KCREP has made a big movement to help unify the field and identify who we are, and, you know, provide us with a concrete definition, if you will. And so with that, we're seeing a strong movement for the need for mental health in general. And LCSWs, although do work in those types of areas, it's quite different from the LPC, where we are really looking at clinical concerns and adjustment and solution-focused approaches, whereas the LCSW doesn't quite have that background. But again, for now, you're probably going to see in the applications LCSW, or you need to have the LPC with LMFT, again, for the state of Virginia, or PhD. And so I'm not sure if you read what Ashley's comment here is. They generally hire social workers, but look into military and family life counselors, which is offered through private contractors for the DoD. That's the other thing to think about. There's individual contractors, and then there's also individuals who you're not individually contracted, and it kind of slips my mind right now. GS. So you're actually considered a government employee, and my husband falls in the GS category. I think what we're seeing though, Ashley, and you may agree with this or disagree, we're seeing those GS positions kind of going away. And I think it's really because of the financial piece. It's more cost effective to bring in an individual contractor than it is to have a GS employee. And so if you do see that GS tag with it though, that's generally, there's more benefits related to that. So just keep that in mind as you're looking. Veterans Affairs Office is a wonderful place also to work if you're looking for therapy. Again, you want to go for that additional, you know, marriage and family emphasis, or a doctorate. Generally, if you have those two areas, you're okay. But you do see LCSW a lot. Oh, okay, okay. actually kind of move out. That's what we're seeing. That's kind of the movement we're seeing. And it ebbs and flows, I think. Any other thoughts or questions? We were kind of slow to warm up, right? It just took a few minutes and then folks started chiming away. That's neat.
Any further questions for this presentation? Nope, I think we're good. Thank you so much, Cassandra.